Right, there we go. Just so everyone knows, we are now live. If you want to ask a question and not be heard or recorded on YouTube, stick your hand up. I'll come and ask the question, paraphrase it, and then ask from there. Right, first of all, I hope you're all having a good day today.
Yeah.
Excellent. Is it anyone's first ever lamb? Cool, excellent. It's one of those crazy things. We always ask that, and a number of people are like, yeah, hands up. So awesome that it's your first one, and doubly awesome for attending the workshops. Okay, because actually this room has a capacity of about 50 people. We generally get anywhere from 450 to 650 people through the building each time. And if you ask who's new, you'll get maybe about 20% hands go up. And yet you don't see everyone who's new in the workshops. And yet actually, you'd think logically, only when I'm new, I've got so much to learn, rather than I've so many things to look at on the stalls. Okay, so it's one of those, come on in, sit down. So big pat on the back for that, because at the end of the day, there isn't a single person who hatched out of an egg understanding and knowing everything about it. Okay, it's not physically possible. We all learn somehow. We all learn from somewhere, and thankfully these workshops are available to help you do that, because when I started a long time ago, they weren't available. So it was a very different world, and learning tended to be a kind of one person passing knowledge on, which is great. That's a very valid way of learning. But the problem is, if you're not careful, that means that every person who's taught gets the same bad information from one person. Okay, and that can happen. So we try and do as many of the workshops and give them as many different speakers as possible, because we've all got a slightly different opinion. Okay, has anyone not played with a violet wand before? Okay, has anyone not actually seen one before? I'll show you one quickly, and I'm going to get my favourite one out. This is about a 1930s Felmer, which has about 28 electrodes in it. It says one of them's fallen out. That goes in there. Voila. Okay. Beautiful antique piece of kit. I'm going to hold that up in front of the camera. I spent far too much money on this. Okay. And let me explain why that happened. I first started going kink clubbing almost 20 years ago now, long time ago. And one of the first clubs I went into, there's this strange noise coming from the corner and a circle of people around. And I thought, what the bloody hell is that? Kind of got close enough, peered over, and there's this old guy sitting there. I say old, seemed very old to me. I was in my early 30s. I'm now in my 50s. Circle of people around with this amazing box that had like light bulbs in it, and it was crackling and sparking. And he was quite a character himself. In fact, he's still around. Big long beard, looks a lot like almost like Catweasel. But he's a really eccentric character. And to me, one of the things that drew me to this was the sight, the sound, the smell of it, the buzz that it created. And I just thought to myself, you know what? I want to be in the middle of that, because that's obviously where the fun is. So at that stage, I went home, started doing some research. Oh, wow, they're called violet wands or violet rays, and this is what they're all about, and started trying to pick one up from there. Because I might be possibly somewhere on the spectrum and a little bit obsessive at times. At one stage, I had 25 of these. Okay. Because actually, when you realize how much fun they are, you kind of want to collect the different varieties, the different styles. This is my baby that I like showing off with, because it's got as close to everything that I can get in one box at one time, but it doesn't have all of the electrodes I like playing with. So I've got one that I have just for a particular effect. This is the one that I tend to travel with. I even have a couple that I've bought just because their design was so unique and different. And actually, those of us that are massive enthusiasts we get incredibly nerdy and swapping pictures backwards and forwards between each other, going, oh, have you seen this one? It's got an amp meter in it. Oh my God, I've never seen one. But what's that pot for atomizing pine oil? And what's that quarterization electrode for? So it's just a great bunch of nerds. And predominantly because this technology comes from a point in time which is very different from today. The genesis of this technology comes from Nikola Tesla. Has anyone not heard of Tesla? Good. Mad Russian scientist. Okay, probably actually, well, ahead of the field of electricity before Edison. So he was into the high voltage electricity without that dangerous current shit that was killing people all over America. But ultimately, the patent office and several stories and brown envelopes later, Edison's technology won. There isn't an exact date for the first Violet one coming out because it's all a little bit grey, and Tesla was an incredibly secretive man. He could have been working on it for 20 or 30 years before the first one came out. And it's an incredibly simple piece of technology. If you've ever turned one on, there's like a ticking noise that you hear. And that's basically a solenoid that's opening and closing and shutting off the current. Okay, so that is a trembler just to make sure that you don't have power continually going through. And then the hand piece contains a capacitor, which charges up and discharges on a regular basis. It's no more complex than that. And in the early days, because this is all pre-transistors and conductors or semiconductors, it's basically mechanical engineering. So you've got coils wound round and round thousands of times with wax embedded in it. There is nothing complex about this technology at all. Now, where did it come from? Well, when electricity was a relatively new thing, it didn't take too long for the quacks to get hold of it and go, ooh, if you attach this to a person, they tingle and they fizz. And sometimes they report feeling better afterwards. No shit, Sherlock. You electrocute someone, you release the endorphins, they get high as a fucking disco biscuit head, and they're having a great time. So a lot of people had that therapeutic benefit because A, they've had a jolt of endorphins and were in their happy space. A lot of pain-killing ability or pain deadening goes along with that. But the second one is to some extent a placebo. Oh my God, someone's paying attention to me, I feel better. And it was no more complex than that. Now, that's why when you look at these kits, you have a variety of electrodes. So, a cone one, obviously, coming through the hair, because if you are going thin on top, well, a little bit of electricity might revitalize you. This one was for the neck, so if you had a sore throat, then you would obviously be applying the restorative electricity to the outside of your neck and it would repair. The mushroom one would be general. There are a few out there. Anyone want to guess where that goes? No. Other end. And because quite literally, things like hemorrhoids, piles, etc., well, surely you've just got to apply the restorative electricity to those areas. Now, they didn't actually think that, glass is actually a very viscous liquid. It's not safe to put these electrodes inside people because they will eventually break, particularly with the anal sphincter, one of the strongest muscles in the human body. So actually, it can literally shatter stuff. Okay. Now, the exception to that, and I'm going to have to just dig a second, because if there's anyone's been through my FetLife profile, they might see some pictures where I have inserted one of these inside someone. And in fact, it's this one, which is a modern borosilicate glass electrode. Okay, give you an idea. That's denting the copper top of the table. Okay, I would not do that with one of those because it would literally go ping and shatter. Okay, there is a weak point on this electrode down at the base there. So if it actually snaps and it doesn't take much pressure to do it, it will snap external to the person. Okay? The Victorians didn't think that logically, which is why we don't put antique bits of glass inside people. So, 1900s they come out. By the 1920s, they're all the rage because there's no NHS. So if you're ill and you need to see the doctor, well, the doctor comes to you to treat your house or to treat you at your house. And that's why a lot of the unrestored violet ones have bayonet connector plugs. Because the first electricity in people's homes was the light socket. So actually the doctor would come around during the day, take the bulb out, plug in, and deliver you some restorative electricity. Okay? Obviously, by the end of the Second World War, when medicine woke up and realised that being a bunch of quacks wasn't very good, and the NHS was formed, a lot of this technology, which, to be perfectly frank, has dubious health benefits at the best of times, I'm prepared to accept what's called the flugellation electrode, which is the one that comes out to a little glass cup with a single metal filament in it. That will get rid of warts, because you can burn them off with it. Okay? Skin tags, you can take them off with it as well. There is some possible indication that bacterial infections and fungal infections can be reduced because of the level of ozone that these machines generate. But outside of that, anyone who says it will cure cancer, gout, or your irritable partner, talking out about, well, might do your irritable partner, but generally, if they're claiming a medical benefit, they're talking out of their backsides. Okay? Shocking as it may sound, I think it was 2009 where a gentleman in Wales got about 5 years in prison for claiming he could cure people of their cancers. Unfortunately, a few people didn't get cured, and that's how they managed to catch him. Okay, so there are quacks out there, but most of that concept kind of disappeared out when medicine became formalized in the 1940s, end of the Second World War. So you think, oh my God, that technology, they must have stopped making it. No. Oddly enough, strange as it may seem, particularly once you understand a little bit more about Tesla as a personality, he was kind of like a cult figure. So there were people that believed that his understanding of science was so much better than the rest of us, so he had his devotees, and the technology remained. And it kind of switched across to a number of different areas. There were a few people who carried on thinking that there was some kind of health benefit, and they moved from calling them violet rays to high frequency electricity units. And I've got one from the 1950s and 60s, beautiful looking piece of kit, but it's clearly a lot more modern than these. It's got proper flick switches in it as opposed to the antique looking ones, and it's a lot quieter in terms of its running. Then by about the 1970s and 80s, when they started expanding, particularly the petrochemical industry, these big metal tanks that they put petrol and stuff in, there's a slight problem. They're steel tanks and they can spark. So you actually have to coat the inside of the tanks with a plastic filament so that it doesn't corrode, etc. How do you find where the break in that plastic cover is? Well, it turns out if you get one of the modern versions of these, crank it all the way up, the spark will jump to the thin points in the coating. So the technology persisted at that particular stage, and you will sometimes see, particularly in a lot of the older kink textbooks, a violet wand that almost looks like a lightsaber, about this kind of size, with a switch on the bottom, only available in US voltage. They're not the best in the world. They're certainly pokey, but at the same time, they're not designed for our kind of play at all. So they never really caught on, partly because they look great, but actually the design flaw meant that if you held it too high up the handle, you got a nice jolt. Whereas a lot of these are better insulated. Obviously, that's a high engineering application. You can still buy them off people, but funnily enough, for about the last 10 years or so, if they suspect that you're kinky, they really don't want to have anything to do with you. Okay, because they're proper serious engineers, these people. Now, at the same time, we started to see some solid state versions of the ones come out, and a lot more that were specifically designed for cosmetology, so cosmetic applications. Again, this belief that the ozone would cleanse your skin. And oddly enough, if you run a violet wand over someone's skin, it does go red. And as far as I can work out with a lot of the beauty industry, it's actually about making your skin and cheeks red. So that pinch effect, anything that brings the blood up, it would seem to be beneficial for the person who's paying for it, and therefore they go away happy, whether it was real or placebo. I'm probably not the person to give the judgment call, but that meant that the technology still persisted. And if you look around, and I borrowed this one from the trust upstairs. This is a modern version. Okay, so they've condensed everything down from the big box to literally all being within the handle itself. Not as pokey in terms of the maximum strength as a unit of this kind of size, but a huge advantage. Buy one of these, it's going to cost you about £1,000 if you can find someone who's prepared to sell you one. Because Felmer 28s were really common about 12 years ago, and the guy said, by the way, I've got 18 of them. And when they're gone, because they've not been made. These, on the other hand, 150, 200 quid, that kind of mark. And to be perfectly honest, if you're looking at getting into an area, it's a little bit like any skill. Don't necessarily, unless you know it's absolutely your thing, go and drop all of the money on the expensive kit to start off with. Because actually, you might get a couple of months in and go, yeah, you know, I'm a bit bored of this now. And you've got a very expensive thing that you've invested in. Whereas if you've got a cheaper one, you can go, I like this, and in 6 months' time you go, it's now time to invest in something a little bit more pokey. Okay? And I always encourage people to approach everything in life that way. How many friends do you know that have a cupboard in their house that when you open it, it's got everything they need for mountaineering or everything they need for water skiing, and they live in Leicester? Not really many opportunities to go water skiing in Leicester, trust me. But there are people who just jump in and they go full in and get too absorbed in their field and area. I can be like that, which is why I have to have that control pedal that goes, don't go mental with a budget until you know you really like it. And then, thankfully, I have an office manager who sets a budget for me each month and tells me I'm not allowed to exceed it. Because otherwise, there were months, my last vanilla job, I was working as an analyst in the city, earning stupid money. Which meant, oh my God, I could buy whatever violet wand I wanted. And I literally would buy one a week at that stage. And they weren't the cheap ones. And it didn't bother me because, you know what? Another month would go by, my paycheck would be cashed, and I'd sit there and go, right, the toy budget for this month is £2,000. Just one of those crazy things. I don't live in that world anymore, and I'm a little bit more restricted nowadays, but thankfully, I've bought most of the kit that I'm looking for. And because I bought quality, it still lasts. This one, when I last had it refurbed, because I've had it refurbed twice, it was either 2012 or 2013. A long, long time ago. But it's something that I look after because it's an important piece of kit. The number of memories that I have associated with this box is just fantastic. If you look on my FetLife pictures, you'll see pictures that are connected with this box that go back to about 2008, 2009. Because it's just been my grab-to box. And let's face it, if you're into objectification, who doesn't want to be turned into a lampshade? And I'm aware of, at one stage there were 3 of those electrodes in the country. I damaged one of them demonstrating, oh look, it's got a weak point on the neck if you tap. And then the moment I tapped it, it snapped off my hand. I went, well, at least I know it works. But there's a guy up in Birmingham who has one of the others, because they're an unusual piece of kit, and the person who I got that from, I'm not even sure that they still make stuff and sell stuff, because sometimes these quirky, eccentric people are only around for a short period of time. It's as simple as that. In fact, speaking of short period of time, I have some really nice electroconductive carbon fibre canes, which I bought about 2007, I think it was. And then when the second phase of the Iraq war kicked off, the military went, yeah, those carbon fibre antennae rods, we'll have all of them for the next 10 years. And literally our supply of carbon fibre canes just evaporated, because military grade equipment, they had the priority on the manufacturer. They needed so many thousands, and there was no spare stock for us to play with. So it's one of those things, can be around for a very short period of time. That kind of brings us up to modern times with wands. I'm going to throw a little bit of a wobbler in there because of the pandemic, because something really interesting happened. A lot of these boxes were coming out of people's barns and farms and odd places in very, very backwater locations. That source seems to have disappeared literally across the pandemic. So there's almost no one with the antique stock left. So if you are looking for one, now is the time to go shopping, because I don't think in about another 5 years you're going to see them for love more money. And at that particular stage, those of us with the 20 odd in our collections are going to be sitting there going, okay, ask me nicely enough and I might let you have one. But there we go. What does a wand actually feel like? That's a difficult question, because it very much depends on the person. Because actually we all have a different pain threshold, different comfort thresholds. We accept sensations in a different way. And equally, if you get up first thing in the morning and you haven't had a drink yet, you're not as conductive to electricity as you are by about lunchtime after you've had kind of half a litre of fluid inside you. Okay? The range can be anything from a mild fizzing tingling, almost like an ant crawling across your skin, to literally someone carving flesh off the bone. Okay? And that depends on the electrode that's being used, the setting on where it's turned up, your responsiveness, and also there are different ways of playing with it. So if you've got a glass electrode in, it's going to be the mildest. If you start modifying stuff and attaching yourself into it, or using knives or metal objects, then those sensations are going to be automatically on the more extreme end of the spectrum. There are a couple of people out there. Some of the electrodes are what we would classify as about a 15 out of 10. Okay, when you plug them in, you can see this disruption to the atmosphere, and almost like lightning rods that come out of it. There was a masochist I knew years ago. I had this cranked right the way up to the maximum. She's standing with her legs apart, and I've got like a ball chain, just a single run of it, going like that between her legs, knocking her head off, asking for it to be turned up. Okay? Quite impressive for one person who's requested it in the best part of 20 years. Okay? Everyone else would be a case of, yeah, no, not even on the lowest setting can that electrode come anywhere near it. Okay, but in her case, that was exactly the sensation she was looking for. Probably doesn't surprise you, that person likes a lot of sharps play, needles being put in places, fresh hooks and pulled and that kind of thing. So it's, but most people generally want to play down at the low end. And actually, when you start playing with people with wands, there is this awful kind of Dunning-Kruger pitfall that people fall into. Oh my God, you liked it on 1 or 2. I'm going to crank it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and try and get to 10 as fast as I can. And you're sitting there going, I liked it on 1 or 2. 3 or 4, it's getting a little bit uncomfortable. 5, 6, you're getting more out of this than I am. I'm stopping. Okay? And that's the best way of framing it, because if you're playing to your own desire to turn the power up, it's going to be a very short play session. Okay? If you play to the other person, then actually you can always come back and add more later, but you can't actually take the thing away that you've already done. Okay? Equally, time-wise, I would strongly advise you when you first start playing with stuff like this to get a manual stopwatch, an egg timer or something like that. Okay? Particularly if you've got an antique piece of kit, they're not designed to be run for 45 minutes. I don't care if being pounded to sticky town is what you're looking for, you can't run the machine for that long, it will break. And the problem is, while everyone's excited, and oh my God, there's bits flying everywhere, you'll all get excited, and the last thing you remember is time. Okay, so set a timer, put it on there. If you run it for 30 minutes, leave it for 30 minutes to cool down before you plug it in and start off again. Okay, now you understand why I've got more than one move. I don't like to wait for them to cool down, so I just hot swap, and I just move from one to the next and go through until the first one's cold enough to go back to it. Okay, but again, it's an expensive way of playing. The other warning I'm going to give is obviously, as of April the 1st, electricity costs went up. This is becoming a more expensive form of play as a result. Okay, because again, if you play with someone who is massively into this, then the chances are it's going to be a regular feature of your play sessions. Okay. In terms of what you can do with it, sky's the limit. It's made of metal, it's conductive, it can be played with. Okay. So all of the knives in the kitchen drawer, all of the utensils, all of the rest. You see a lot of the metal toys on the stalls upstairs. That's simply because, wow, okay, a metal claw, it's a great sensation on its own. You run the electrics through it and it can literally feel like someone's got a curling hand on there for scraping the flesh off your back. Okay. Good news is, it doesn't necessarily leave too much of a mark. Leave a little bit, and that will go down after a period of time. How long that time is, that entirely depends on you people and how your skin responds. Okay. There are people out there who the minest of touches, huge welt comes up, okay, which can be great. Turn your violet wand on, get the candles out, play noughts and crosses, okay, brilliant. The one thing I will advise you not to do, without really seriously thinking about this and pre-morteming all of the risks, is writing things on people with a violet wand. You can do it, you can temporarily brand with these things. It will fade with time, however, that damaged skin will never behave like the rest of the skin on your body. Okay?
Somebody.
So, Mistress's slut split up with Mistress and went on holiday with his wife and kids. And the first day sitting there on the beach, he went a lovely lobster colour, apart from the word Mistress's slut branded across his chest. Okay, one of those. If you're going to play these games, I'll defend your right to do so, but please understand the consequences of them before doing so. Okay, it's one of those. Health, toys, other bits and pieces. Couple of bits that I will throw in. It's not a toy for everyone. Okay, if you've got a heart problem, not for you. Definitely not for you. Got an implanted medical device, may not be for you either.
Medical device.
Medical, so insulin pumps and stuff like that, because the circuitry of that can be destroyed just by the box being turned on. Does that make sense? So anything that's got like an EPU or a CPU, like a silicon chip that's programmed, you can lose the programming on them instantly. And if it's the device that your body depends on, it's not worth the risk.
But just simple metal things or stuff is not going to affect.
Some people, yes, others not. That one entirely depends on how that is connected with you. So if it's embedded and it's not touching any of the nerves, you might not have a problem. If it touches a nerve, you might find that you go near it and it's an unpleasant sensation, or not the one you expect, if that makes sense. So lowest power setting, be sensible, talk to the person beforehand, because if someone comes up to me and goes, I really want to try this, but I have all of these issues, if they've told me beforehand, I'm really happy. I'll work with them and we'll find a way of doing it as safely as possible. What I get upset with is the person who comes round at the end of a play session and goes, oh yeah, I didn't bother to tell you I'm epileptic. Yeah, shit, that's a big problem for me. Okay? Because we've had to pull people off crosses who've literally collapsed in fits. Okay? And they've not bothered to tell people about problems. So if you know in advance, we can work on it, we can work around it, and it might be that we try it elsewhere on your body first, you get comfortable with that sensation, and then deliberately move it near areas where you may have a problem, but you've got a benchmark to say that's what it should feel like, and now when it goes near there, it's fine or it's not fine, and only experimentation will tell. Does that make sense? Cool. Excellent. So, implanted medical devices, plates. It's one of those. Some people get it, some people don't. There's no way of predicting which one of the two. And obviously, there are people out there who are literally fearful of electricity. I've met one or two of them. It's usually because of a previous trauma in their life. Okay? And the general rule is if someone goes, yeah, I've got a phobia of electricity, don't push them on it. Particularly if they're ex-military. They may have been doing things that you probably don't want to know that they were doing, or someone did them to them, and therefore they have a phobia of electricity as a result. Okay? I know at least one person in London who we have to look around, and if we're going to plug in a wand, we go, you need to be in another room for about another 30 minutes or so. Okay? Because once you know about it, you can deal with it. What you don't want is that person screaming the place down because they've gone into a panic attack, because the noise has sent them back to a very horrid place in their life, and they just want to get out of the building as fast as they can. Okay? Sounds crazy, does happen. It's rare, but it's something that we do need to. Someone did many years ago make a battery-powered version of one of these. Well, it took like 2 24-volt car batteries to get it running. Okay. Quite why it was done was a mystery. I believe it had something to do with the fact that they wanted to attach someone to a violet wand while they were on a boat. And that was their solution, was to make this device that enabled it to go out. It ran for very, very short periods of time, but generally a good power supply is important. The other thing I will say when you're playing with these, particularly if you bring them out to a club, there are idiots holding glasses of fluid at clubs. Okay? I guarantee you someone will, what's that? At some stage. Okay? So just be careful if you do bring them out, and be careful at home. Okay? Because what you don't want is for someone to kind of go, oh my god, it's amazing, leg starts kicking, bang, vase goes over, walk all over the place. Okay, so just be sensible, have a good prepped area. I would also say generally take the phone off the hook. Okay, Because every time I get ready to do one of these big sessions with one of these, I've got someone in a swing of some description, legs up in stirrups, I'm going at them, lining up, getting ready. That's the point my mother always calls me. Without fucking fail. So sometimes I now actually, I'm playing at 3 o'clock this afternoon, so I'm going to ring Mum at 2, get it out the way, because otherwise she'll get that, ooh, I wonder why I'm thinking of David all of a sudden. And she will, she'll just pick up the phone and I'm like, yeah, Mother, in the middle of something, thank you, goodbye. Because you always want to pick up the phone because it's an emergency. So prep, plan. If you are quite vocal, you may lose your voice with some of this, okay? Because with a lot of electrical stimulation, it's not as if any of us are Marvel superheroes with the ability to pass electricity out of our fingers, okay? These are things that human beings cannot do without the technical interface, okay? So as a result, it adds an extra dimension to wild sets, okay? Because if you're prepared to take a rubber sheet, cut a hole in it and separate the two of you, then actually the only place that the electricity passes is where you make bodily contact, okay? Great fun, but as a result, it's a sensation that you couldn't achieve without the technology, and therefore, if you're vocal, you might come a lot closer to losing your voice, okay? Particularly with the internal violet wand electrode, that one quite often people need about half an hour to sit down in a quiet room afterwards to recompose themselves. Because again, it's a sensation that they will have never experienced before. One of the advantages of wands, and again, one of the reasons why they were believed to have this medical therapeutic benefit, is that they can often leave the skin very sensitive afterwards. So, oh my God, my skin must be healthy because I can feel this. Okay, worked for the quacks, actually works for us as well. Because you might be doing some play where it's sensation and you want to actually elevate the body. Applying the wand first means that that ice cube will feel extra cold. That warm thing will feel more warm. If it's made of fur or material, that sensation will transmit a lot more as well. Okay? So, that's probably a canned brief history of violet wands. Nutty, mad, crazy scientists from the 1900s, but obviously deviants out there have kept the technology going as much as we can from then to now. Good luck trying to get something like this past modern electrical standards. A lot of the antique boxes, they produce a lot of interference. There was a guy that foolishly plugged one in next to a lighting desk at a nightclub in Vauxhall. Yeah, that was an expensive mistake because it wiped the memory of the lighting desk. And then, you know what? Nightclubs without lights, they're not very effective. So the night finished at about 1:30 in the morning, and the guy, I don't think we saw him again for about 6 months. Every time he said, I'm going to come to you with lunch, someone would poke up and go, yeah, don't bring you violet wand. One of those. Okay, so be careful where you use it, be careful when you use it, be careful with it, be careful who you play with at the end of the day, because you know what? A lot easier to replace your wand than the person you're playing with. Okay, simple as that. I'm not aware of a major health-related issue that has been directly linked to wands, other than one person who was repeatedly told you should not play with electricity. Your cardiologist had told you not to play with electricity. Stop playing with electricity, and eventually, yeah, it was a case of ambulances were being called because really should not have been playing with electricity at any stage of that process. Okay, but apart from that, they are relatively safe. Okay, but like everything in life, it's safer not to play with it than to play with it. Okay, and if you keep that in mind, I don't think you'll go too far wrong. Outside of that, I will have my wand with me this evening. If anyone wants to experience it, I'll be kicking around for the after party. I'm not sure what floor I'm going to be located on, because unfortunately it tends to interrupt the bondage quite severely because it's a different energy, if that makes sense. But I'll find a quiet spot, maybe down in one of the booths, and if anyone wants to try it, come and give me a shout. If you're not staying for the after party and you want to try it, I'm paying back at the end of this section and I'll turn it on and give you a try. Outside of that, that's me done on a brief history of violet wands. There are a couple of other electroplay workshops I've done in the past that delve into it in terms of the difference between violet wands and e-stims and the various different devices out there. In fact, one of the ones I did during lockdown is probably the best because I had fuck all else to do other than to update my PowerPoints and start recording for the next week. Okay, so that's definitely out there. And equally, if you've got any questions, just ask. Because I'd far rather people were sensible and learned than kind of went running like a bull in a china shop and ran into problems. Because the moment problems start, it draws attention, and we want to avoid that. Because quite frankly, if you went into your doctors and said, actually, what really floats my boat is people wiring up my various erogenous zones and passing current through it, they're going to be disappointed that the classification 65 is no longer available and you can't be immediately sectioned, but they are going to be worried enough that it's going to go on your notes. Okay? So just be sensible about it. They don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of your sex life. They might need to know that you're alternative, just in case they see a bruise or something like that. We don't want them panicking, but we don't need to be sharing the finer details of what they're doing with these devices because, as far as they're concerned, oh my God, you're going to kill yourselves. Okay. The fact that people are repurposing the TENS machines that were given by the NHS seems to be lost on them, but there we go. Cool. I think that's done. Any final questions? No? Cool. I'm going to turn this off. Does anyone want to experience it?